The penthouse occupied the entire 47th floor, and from its floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below like a circuit board, orderly and utterly indifferent. Alistair Finch stood at the glass, a cup of single-origin coffee growing cold in his hand, and watched the morning commute crawl along the arterial roads. Thousands of people heading somewhere important. Thousands of lives brushing against others. He hadn't spoken to anyone who wasn't paid to be there in 3 days at 32. Alistair had achieved everything the world told him should matter. His company, Finch Technologies, had revolutionized data storage before he was old enough to rent a car. His net worth fluctuated by millions daily, based on nothing more than market sentiment. His face had appeared on magazine covers he'd never read, his name spoken in boardrooms he'd never visited. And yet, standing in his $17 million apartment, surrounded by furniture he'd never chosen and art he'd never wanted, Alistair Finch felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Finch?" The voice belonged to Patricia, his executive assistant, though she spoke through the building's concierge system. "Your 9 o'clock is here." The housekeeping agency representative. He'd forgotten. Of course he had. Meetings blurred together like watercolors investors, lawyers, philanthropists, cleaners. They all wanted something. They all left footprints that vanished the moment the door closed. "Send them up," he said, not moving from the window. The apartment was immaculate. It was always immaculate. Alistair suspected it cleaned itself out of sheer loneliness. The kitchen, with its Italian marble and German appliances, had never produced a meal. The dining table, seating 12, had never held a guest. The guest bedrooms, all 3 of them, had never known an overnight visitor. It was a museum dedicated to the life he was supposed to be living, curated by people he paid to care. The elevator chimed. He heard the soft slide of the door, then footsteps crossing the marble foyer. "Mr. Finch?" He turned. The woman standing in his entryway was not what he'd expected. He'd anticipated someone professional, but anonymous another. Interchangeable face in the army of service providers that kept his existence functioning. Instead, he found himself looking at a woman perhaps his age, with warm brown skin, dark eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that seemed to exist for its own sake rather than for his approval. She held a tablet in one hand and a canvas tote bag in the other, bulging with what he assumed were cleaning supplies. "Elara Jones," she said, extending her hand without hesitation. "From Premier Clean. We have your weekly assessment scheduled?" Patricia confirmed yesterday. Her handshake was firm, brief, and utterly without the tentative deference he'd grown accustomed to. She looked around the apartment with genuine curiosity rather than the veiled assessment most visitors performed, mentally cataloging his worth. "Yes," he said, and his voice sounded strange to him. "The assessment?" "Of course." She was already moving, not waiting for permission. "Beautiful space," she called over her shoulder, walking toward the kitchen. "Kind of empty, though." "You just move in?" 3 years ago. She laughed a real laugh, warm and unguarded. "Well, at least you're not one of those people who redecorates every season. My last client, Mrs. Harrington, she changed her drapes more often than I change my toothbrush. Nice lady. Terrible taste in fabric." Alistair followed her, unsure why he wasn't retreating to his office. He had calls. He had spreadsheets. He had a world waiting for his attention. Instead, he watched Elara Jones open his Sub-Zero refrigerator, raise an eyebrow at its contents, 3 bottles of water, a bag of coffee beans, and nothing else, and close it without comment. "The assessment is usually pretty straightforward," she said, pulling a clipboard from her tote. "I'll walk through each room, note any special requirements, and then we can schedule recurring visits. Patricia mentioned you prefer evenings when you're traveling, but your calendar shows you're in town most weeks." "I'm here," he said. Then, for reasons he couldn't explain, added, "I'm always here." She looked at him then, really looked, and he felt something shift in the air between them. Not attraction, exactly. Recognition. Like she'd seen something in him that he'd forgotten was there. "Well," she said, returning to her clipboard, "we'll figure out what works. Let's start in the living room." For the next 45 minutes, Alistair followed Elara Jones through his apartment like a lost child. She asked questions no one had ever asked. Did he actually use the fireplace? No. Did he want the books in his office dusted individually, or just the shelves? He didn't know there was a difference. Had he considered having the windows professionally treated to reduce glare on his monitors? He hadn't. She talked as she worked, not the nervous chatter of someone filling silence, but genuine conversation. She told him about her daughter, Lily, who was 7 and had recently decided she wanted to be an astronaut/veterinarian/ballerina. She mentioned the bookshop she visited on weekends. A cramped, glorious mess of a place called the Spined Leaf, where the owner let Lily sit in the window seat and read for hours. "You should go sometime," she said, examining the marble in his guest bathroom. "It's not like those fancy places with the curated selections and the overpriced coffee. It's real. Books everywhere, stacked on the floor, in the windows, on the stairs. Mr. Henderson, who runs it, he remembers everyone's name, knows what they like to read. It's magic." Alistair thought of his own books, pristine hardcovers delivered by a personal shopper, arranged by color on floating shelves. He'd never read most of them. "I'll keep that in mind," he said. When she finally finished, tucking her clipboard back into her tote, she turned to him with that same warm smile. "All right, Mr. Finch. I'll send the proposal to Patricia by end of day. We can start whenever you're ready." "Alistair," he said. She tilted her head. "My name?" "It's Alistair. Mr. Finch is my father." She laughed again, and the sound seemed to fill the empty spaces of his apartment in a way all his expensive things never had. "Nice to meet you, Alistair. I'm Elara, but you already knew that." After she left, the apartment felt emptier than before. He stood in the foyer, listening to the silence, and realized he could still smell her perfume, something simple, like vanilla and sunshine. Not expensive, not curated, real. That night he ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter, staring at his phone. The proposal had arrived, as promised. Weekly cleaning, every Thursday morning. Special attention to the office bookshelves. Window treatment consultation recommended. He approved it without reading the cost. 3 weeks later, Alistair had learned the rhythm of Elara's visits. She arrived at 9, always with that canvas tote, always with a story about Lily or traffic or the ridiculousness of someone she'd cleaned for. She worked efficiently, but she talked while she worked, and he found himself inventing reasons to be home on Thursday mornings. He'd canceled 2 investor calls. He'd postponed a board meeting. His CFO had started looking at him strangely. Today, she was telling him about Lily's school play. "She's a tree," Elara said, spraying his kitchen counters with a solution that smelled like lemons. "A tree, Alistair, with 3 lines. And she's been practicing for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Last night, she made me stand in the living room for 2 hours, while she repeated the same 3 sentences over and over. I know every inflection, every pause. I could play her role better than she can, and I don't even have leaves attached to my arms." He laughed, actually laughed. The sound startled him. "Sounds like you'll need a front row seat," he said. "Front row? I'm bringing binoculars and a standing ovation. That's my baby up there." She could stand silent for the entire show, and I'd still cry. The image struck him. Elara in an audience, beaming, wiping tears, filled with a love so complete it radiated from her like heat. He'd never experienced anything like that. His own parents sent cards on his birthday. His mother's assistant chose them. "What about you?" she asked, wiping down the stove. "Any family in the city?" "No," he said. "It's just me." She paused, looking at him with those dark, perceptive eyes. That must get lonely. It wasn't a question. It wasn't pity. It was simply an observation, stated as fact. "Sometimes," he admitted, and the word felt like stepping off a cliff. She nodded, returned to her cleaning. "Well, if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here on Thursdays. And if you ever need a tree costume, Lily's first draft is still in our living room. You're welcome to borrow it." He smiled, and it felt unfamiliar on his face. "I'll keep that in mind." That afternoon, after she'd gone, he stood in his kitchen and realized the counters gleamed, the windows sparkled, and the apartment felt less like a museum. For the first time in years, it felt like somewhere someone might actually want to live. He didn't know yet that he was already living in it. He didn't know that Elara Jones, with her canvas tote and her tree-costumed daughter and her magic bookshop, had done more than clean his apartment. She'd opened a door he hadn't known was locked. And on the other side of that door, everything was about to change. The idea came to Alistair on a Tuesday, 3 days before Elara's next scheduled visit. He was in a boardroom, listening to a marketing director explain engagement metrics, when his mind drifted to the way Elara had laughed at his kitchen counter, not at him, but with him, like they were sharing something private and wonderful. He wanted to hear that laugh again. He wanted to be the reason for it. But when she arrived on Thursday, she wouldn't find Alistair Finch, billionaire CEO. She'd find some version of the man who'd stood in his kitchen and admitted to loneliness. She'd find someone real. The problem was, he had no idea how to be that person. So when his building superintendent mentioned needing to check the fire suppression system in the penthouse, Alistair had an epiphany so absurd that he almost laughed out loud. Almost. "I'll do it," he said. The superintendent, a man named Roberto, who'd worked in the building for 20 years, stared at him. "Mr. Finch, with respect, you don't know how to check a fire suppression system." "No," Alistair agreed. "But I can learn." What followed was 48 hours of YouTube tutorials. A humiliating trip to a hardware store where he couldn't identify half the items on his list, and 3 practice runs in a service closet where Roberto reluctantly agreed to supervise. By Thursday morning, Alistair Finch, who'd once negotiated a billion-dollar merger in 40 minutes, felt less prepared than he had for anything in his life. He dressed carefully. Old jeans he'd owned since college, a plain gray T-shirt, a worn cap pulled low. He looked in the mirror and saw a stranger who, for the first time in years, seemed worth knowing. Elara arrived at 9, as always. But when the elevator opened, the man waiting wasn't the polished billionaire in Italian suits. It was someone else entirely, someone in jeans and a cap, holding a wrench with the uncertainty of a man who'd never held one before. "Hi," he said, and his voice came out higher than intended. "You must be Elara?" "I'm Alfie. I'm, maintenance. The building sent me to fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen. Hope you don't mind me working while you clean." She blinked, processing. Then that warm smile spread across her face. "Maintenance? They send maintenance to billionaires' apartments?" "Someone's got to do it," he said, and the lie felt both terrible and wonderful. "Mr. Finch is out of town. Said I should let myself in." "Well, nice to meet you, Alfie." She extended her hand, and he shook it, marveling at how different this felt from their first meeting. Then she'd been an employee, he the client. Now, in his mind at least, they were something else. 2 working people, equals. The faucet, predictably, wasn't leaking. Alistair had disabled it himself the night before. a move Roberto had called insane, and definitely a fireable offense. But as Ilara unpacked her supplies and began her routine, he crouched under the sink and pretended to work, stealing glances at her through the cabinet gap. She hummed while she cleaned. He hadn't noticed that before. Soft, wordless melodies that drifted through the kitchen as she wiped counters and organized his coffee maker. She talked to herself, too little comments about stubborn spots or the ridiculous number of pillows on his couch. 27 pillows, she muttered, stacking them on a chair. Who needs 27 pillows? One person, one, and 27 pillows. Make it make sense, he snorted, then covered it with a cough. You okay under there, Alfie? Fine, he called, his voice muffled. Just, tricky pipes. She sounded unconvinced, but she let it go. For the next hour, they existed in parallel, her cleaning, him pretending to fix things neither of them needed. But slowly, inevitably, they began to talk. She asked where he was from. He said the suburbs, which was technically true, if you counted the estate where he'd grown up. He asked about Lily, still practicing her tree lines, still taking it very seriously. She told him about the bookshop, the spined leaf, and how she'd spent her lunch break there yesterday, reading the first chapter of a novel she couldn't afford to buy. They let you read without buying? He asked, emerging from under the sink to wipe imaginary grease from his hands. Mr. Henderson does. He says books are for reading, not for owning. If you can't buy them, you should still read them. He's got this old armchair in the corner, right by the window, and he lets anyone sit there as long as they want. Lily calls it the magic chair. Alistair thought of his own books, arranged by color, untouched. Sounds like a special place. It is. She paused, sponge in hand, and looked at him. You should come sometime. Bring a book, read for an hour. It's free. I might do that, he said, and meant it. The weeks that followed became the best of Alistair's adult life. He studied maintenance like it was a hostile takeover, watching videos, practicing on his own fixtures, even asking Roberto to teach him basic repairs. Every Thursday, he became Alfie. Every Thursday, he and Ilara talked while she cleaned, and he pretended to work. He learned her story in fragments. She'd had Lily young, with a man who'd left before their daughter was born. No child support, no contact, nothing. She'd built their life alone, working 2 jobs, then 3, then settling into cleaning because it offered flexibility and she could be home when Lily needed her. She didn't complain about any of it. She simply stated it as fact, then moved on to something brighter. You're amazing, he said once, without thinking. She laughed, that warm sound he'd come to treasure. I'm a cleaner with a 7-year-old who thinks she's a tree. Amazing is a strong word. It's the right word, he said, and something flickered in her eyes before she looked away. He started leaving small gifts. Not the extravagant things his wealth could buy. Those would raise questions. Small things. A book she'd mentioned wanting, left on the counter with a note from the building ghost. A pair of comfortable slip-resistant shoes in her size, appearing in the cleaning closet. A gift card to the coffee shop next to the spined leaf, tucked into her supply bag. You have a secret admirer, he said one Thursday, watching her find the shoes. She held them up, genuine surprise on her face. Alfie, did you do this? He shrugged, aiming for casual. The building has a budget for, staff appreciation. You do good work. It's noticed. She looked at him for a long moment, those dark eyes searching. Then she smiled, softer than usual. Thank you, really. My old ones are held together with hope and duct tape. That smile stayed with him for days. It followed him into board meetings, accompanied him through sleepless nights, made him feel like the richest man in the world and the poorest simultaneously. Because every Thursday, He was Alfie, and every other day he was Alistair Finch. And those two people had never felt further. Part. The complication arrived on a rainy Thursday in October. Alistair was helping Alara move a heavy bookshelf in his office. He'd claimed that Mr. Finch wanted it repositioned when his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at it automatically, then froze. The screen showed a text from his CFO. Emergency board meeting called for 2 p.m. Finch. Technology's stock down 4% on the rumors. Need you there. Alara looked up. Everything okay? Fine, he said too quickly. Just, my other job. They need me this afternoon. She nodded, returning to her dusting. But her eyes lingered on his phone for a moment, too long, and Alistair felt the first prickle of danger. Later, as she was finishing up, she paused at his desk. Among the papers and devices sat a framed photo, the only personal item in the entire apartment. It was old, faded, showing a young Alistair with his grandmother, the one person who'd loved him unconditionally before she died. Who's this? Alara asked, picking it up. My grandmother, he said, before remembering that Alfie shouldn't have a grandmother in a billionaire's apartment. I mean, Mr. Finch's grandmother. I've seen it before. When I'm working. She set it down carefully, but her expression had shifted. You know a lot about Mr. Finch for someone who just does maintenance. He forced a laugh. You pick things up. Working in someone's space. She gathered her supplies, her movements quicker than usual. Well, I'm done for today. Tell Mr. Finch I said hello. At the door, she turned back. Alfie, that watch you're wearing. It's nice. Really nice for maintenance. He looked down. His watch. His real watch, the Patek Philippe he'd forgotten to remove. Under the cheap cap and worn jeans, it gleamed against his wrist like an accusation. I got it at a flea market, he said. She didn't respond. The elevator doors closed, and Alistair stood alone in his empty apartment, the lie hanging between them like smoke. He'd wanted to be seen. He'd wanted to be real. But he hadn't counted on being seen through. And somewhere in the city, on a bus heading home, Alara Jones sat with her canvas tote and thought about a maintenance man with a $50,000 watch and eyes that seemed too sad for someone who only fixed faucets. She thought about the books that appeared like magic, the shoes that fit perfectly, the way Alfie always seemed to be there when she cleaned, even when the billionaire was supposedly out of town. The week after Alara noticed his watch was the longest of Alistair's life. He barely slept. He canceled meetings. He stared at his phone, willing it to ring, dreading what she might say when it did. But Thursday came, and she arrived exactly at 9, exactly as always, and for a terrible moment, he thought everything might be fine. She didn't mention the watch. She didn't mention anything. She cleaned in near silence, responding to his attempts at conversation with monosyllables, her humming replaced by something heavier. By the time she left, Alistair felt like he'd been holding his breath for 3 hours. That pattern continued for weeks. Alara was professional, efficient, and utterly distant. The warmth that had grown between them had frozen over, and Alistair didn't know how to thought without telling her the truth. But the truth felt impossible now. How did you tell someone you'd been lying to them for months? How did you explain that the person they'd trusted, the friend they'd made, wasn't real? He stopped leaving gifts. He stopped pretending to fix things. He simply existed in her presence, desperate and silent, watching the one genuine connection he'd ever known slip through his fingers. And then, on a Thursday in late November, everything changed. Alara arrived with news. Alistair could see it in her face the moment she stepped off the elevator. Something bright struggling beneath the surface of her polite distance. You okay? He asked, because even frozen out, he couldn't stop caring. She hesitated, then nodded. Actually, yeah. Something happened. Something good. He waited. You know that bookshop I'm always talking about? The spined leaf? She set down her supplies, and for the first time in weeks, some of her old warmth flickered through. Mr. Henderson, the owner, he's been struggling. Rent keeps going up, and the developer who owns the building wants to sell. Turn it into another coffee chain, probably. He's been fighting it for months, but... She trailed off, shaking her head. Anyway, something changed. Someone bought the building. Some company no one's heard of. And they're not raising the rent. They're lowering it, giving Mr. Henderson a 5-year lease at half of what he was paying. That's great, Alistair said, and meant it with his whole heart. It gets better. Her eyes shone. They're running some kind of contest for small business owners in the community. The prize is a 10-year lease on a retail space, same building, with the first 5 years at below-market rent. You just have to write an essay about your dream and why you deserve it. She laughed, and it was almost her real laugh. I applied. Me, Elara Jones with her cleaning supplies and her tree costume daughter. I actually applied. Elara, that's amazing. I probably won't win, she said quickly, as if afraid to hope. I mean, people with real business plans, real experience, they'll apply. I thought about Lily, about what it would mean to have something of our own. A place she could come after school. A place that was ours. She picked up her sponge, then set it down again. Anyway, it's probably nothing. But it felt good to dream for a minute. Alistair watched her, and in that moment, he knew what he had to do. The shell company took 3 days to establish. His lawyers thought he was acquiring another tech startup. He let them believe it. The purchase of the building took another week, negotiated through intermediaries who never mentioned his name. By the time the contest winner was set to be announced, Alistair had spent more money than most people see in a lifetime, and he'd never been happier to write a check. He didn't tell her. He couldn't. Not yet. But he started leaving gifts, again small things, like a notebook for her business plan, a pen engraved with the spined leaf, a children's book about a girl who runs a bookstore. She accepted them stiffly at first, but gradually, inevitably, the ice began to thaw. You're persistent, she said one Thursday, finding a coffee shop gift card in her supply bag. I'll give you that? I don't know what you mean, he said, adjusting a faucet that definitely didn't need adjusting. She almost smiled. Almost. The call came on a Tuesday. Alistair was in his office, pretending to review documents, when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I won. He stared at the screen, heart pounding. Then another text arrived. It's Elara. I don't know how you got my number, but I know it was you. The notebook, the pen, the books. And now this? A bookshop? My bookshop? Alfie, what have you done? He didn't respond. He couldn't. What could he possibly say? Thursday came, and Alistair waited. He'd planned to be Alfie, to face her in his worn jeans and pretend one last time. But when the elevator chimed and the doors opened, it wasn't Elara standing there with her canvas tote dot. It was a different woman entirely. Younger, professional, holding a tablet. Mr. Finch? She said, I'm Danielle. Premier Clean sent me. Elara asked for a reassignment. The words hit him like a physical blow. Is she okay? She's fine. She just requested not to work this building anymore. Danielle stepped inside, already assessing the space. Shall I begin? Alistair didn't hear her. He was already reaching for his phone, typing a message to the number that had texted him days ago. Please, let me explain. The response came hours later, long after Danielle had finished cleaning a space that felt emptier than ever. Explain what? That you lied? That you played me for months? That I told you my dreams, and you turned them into some kind of charity project? I don't need your explanation, Alfie, or whatever your name is. I need you to stay away from me and my daughter. He typed and deleted a dozen responses. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt adequate. Because she was right. He had lied. He had played a part. And in doing so, he'd turned the most real thing in his life into a performance. The bookshop opened. 6 weeks later, Alistair watched from across the street, hidden in a coffee shop window, as Alara cut the ribbon. Lily stood beside her, beaming, dressed in a sweater covered in book prints. Mr. Henderson was there too, old and frail, but glowing with pride. The whole neighborhood seemed to have turned out. He'd given her the shop. He'd made her dream come true. And he'd never felt more alone. For weeks, he'd tried to reach her. Letters delivered by hand. Flowers sent anonymously. A first edition of her favorite novel left on the shop's doorstep. She returned everything unopened. The flowers went to a hospital. The book, he later learned, she donated to the library. She wanted nothing from him. And who could blame her? He threw himself back into work, but nothing stuck. The company ran without him. It always had. His presence was ceremonial, symbolic, unnecessary. He sat in boardrooms and thought about a woman humming while she cleaned. He reviewed quarterly reports and remembered the way she laughed when Lily practiced her tree lines. He approved million-dollar acquisitions and heard her voice saying, "That must get lonely." It did. It always had. But now he knew the difference between lonely and empty. The call came on a Sunday night from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Finch?" The voice was young, scared. "This is Danielle? From Premier Clean? I'm sorry to bother you, but Alara's in trouble. Her daughter, Lily, she's in the hospital. Alara doesn't have insurance, and the bills are already piling up. And she won't ask for help. She won't take anything from you." But I didn't know who else to call. Alistair was already reaching for his keys. "What hospital?" "Children's Mercy. But Mr. Finch, she won't want to see you. I don't care what she wants." He was moving, grabbing his coat, heading for the door. "I care about what she needs. Tell me the room number." He drove faster than he had in years, abandoning his car in a fire lane, running through hospital corridors until he found the right floor. Through the window of room 417, he saw Alara. She sat beside a small bed, holding the hand of a sleeping girl with tubes running from her arms. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. He didn't knock. He simply opened the door and walked in. She looked up, and for one terrible moment, he saw rage flash through her exhaustion. But then it faded, replaced by something worse, defeat. "What are you doing here?" She whispered. "I heard Lily was sick." He kept his distance, not wanting to push. "I'm not here to fight, Alara. I'm not here to explain or apologize or ask for anything. I'm here because a little girl needs help, and you shouldn't have to face that alone. I don't need your money. I know." He took a step closer, slow, careful. "But I have it, and you have a daughter who needs the best care in this city, and I can make that happen in about 10 minutes. Let me, please. Not as Alfie, not as some charity case, not as anything except someone who cares about you. Let me help." She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, Lily stirred, murmuring in her sleep. "Why?" Alara asked, and the word held everything. The lies. The betrayal. The impossible hope that maybe, just maybe, something real had existed beneath it all. Alistair looked at her, truly looked, and let himself be seen for the first time since this began. "Because I love you," he said. "I've loved you since the moment you laughed at my empty refrigerator. And I have spent months trying to figure out how to be worthy of that love. I don't know if I ever will be. But I know I can't walk away while you're hurting. So let me stay. Let me help. And if you still want me gone when this is over, I'll go. I promise." The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Then Ilara turned back to her daughter, and in a voice so quiet he almost missed it, she said, "Stay." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust. But it was something. And for now, Alistair Finch decided Sam. The hospital room operated on its own strange clock, where minutes stretched like hours and days, blurred together in a haze of beeping monitors and hushed conversations. Alistair stayed. He didn't leave. He made calls from the corridor to the best pediatric specialists in the city, to the hospital's administration, to anyone who could help, and within 24 hours, Lily had been moved to a private room with a team of experts consulting on her case. Ilara watched it all from a distance. She sat in the hard plastic chair beside Lily's bed, holding her daughter's hand, as she watched the man she'd known as Alfie transform into someone else entirely. He was efficient, commanding, utterly in control. People jumped when he spoke. Doors opened when he approached. This was the real Alistair Finch, she realized. Not the bumbling maintenance man who couldn't fix a faucet. This man had moved mountains in a day. This man could do anything, except, it seemed, convince her to forgive him. "I don't know how to thank you," she said on the third day, when Lily had finally woken up, had smiled weakly at her mother, had asked for ice cream. The doctors were optimistic now. The crisis had passed. "You don't have to thank me." Alistair stood by the window, giving them space, but refusing to leave. "I told you. I'm not here for thanks. Then what are you here for?" The question came out sharper than she intended, but she was tired, so tired. And the confusion of the past months had settled into something heavy and hard. He turned to face her, and she saw the answer in his eyes before he spoke. "I'm here because I couldn't be anywhere else. I'm here because I tried staying away, and it nearly destroyed me. I'm here because I love you, Ilara, not the idea of you. Not some fantasy I built in my head. You, the woman who hums while she cleans. The mother who practiced tree lines for 6 weeks. The person who made me feel human for the first time in my adult life. You lied to me." Her voice cracked. Every word, every moment, it was all built on a lie. No. He crossed the room, stopping a careful distance from her chair. The circumstances were a lie. The name was a lie. But everything I felt, everything we shared, that was real. That was the most real thing I've ever known. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But the betrayal sat in her chest like a stone, heavy and immovable. "You let me talk about my life, my struggles, my dreams. You let me complain about money while you sat there with more than I'll ever see. You knew, every single second, that you could fix everything with a check, and you just watched, like I was entertainment. No." He knelt beside her chair, close enough to touch, but not touching. "I watched because I was terrified. I watched because for the first time in my life, someone saw me not the billionaire, not the CEO, just me, and I didn't know how to risk losing that. I kept telling myself I'd tell you tomorrow, next week, when the timing was right. And then more time passed, and the lie got bigger, and I didn't know how to undo it without losing you. You lost me anyway." "I know." His voice broke, just slightly. "I know I did. And if that's how it ends, I'll live with it. But I need you to know the truth. All of it. Not the version I thought you wanted, but the real thing. I'm lonely, Ilara. I've been lonely my entire life. I have money and power, and people who pretend to care because I sign their paychecks. And I would trade every penny of it for one more Thursday morning with you." She stared at him, searching for the lie, the performance, the angle. She found none. Just a man on his knees in a hospital room, offering her the only thing he had left, the truth. Lily recovered. That was the miracle that anchored everything else. 2 weeks after she'd been admitted, she walked out of the hospital holding her mother's hand, pale but smiling, already asking when she could go back to school and see her friends and, most importantly, visit the bookshop. The bookshop. Alara hadn't been there since Lily got sick. She'd left it in Mr. Henderson's care, trusting him to keep it running, but now the thought of returning filled her with complicated emotions. The shop was her dream. It was also, inextricably now, a gift from the man who'd lied to her. "You should go," Alistair said as they waited for a cab outside the hospital. "Lily's with me. I'll take her home, make sure she's settled. You should go see her shop. It's not my shop." The words came out bitter. "It's yours. You bought it. You gave it to me like I was some kind of charity case." "It's not charity." He faced her, and there was something fierce in his expression now. "It's not pity. It's not even a gift. It's an investment, Alara. In you. In what you can build. I saw something in you that you don't see in yourself, and I used the resources I have to give you a chance to prove me right. That's not charity. That's belief. A belief built on lies, built on love." He held her gaze. "I know you don't trust that yet. I know you might never trust it. But I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here, whether you want me or not, for as long as it takes." The cab arrived. Alara climbed in, her daughter beside her, and as they pulled away, she watched Alistair Finch recede in the rearview mirror. He stood alone on the hospital steps, hands in his pockets, watching them go. She didn't look back. Weeks passed. Alara threw herself into the bookshop with a ferocity that surprised even her. She arrived before dawn and stayed past closing, organizing shelves, learning inventory, memorizing her customers' names and preferences the way Mr. Henderson had. The shop thrived. The neighborhood rallied around her. Lily came after school and sat in the magic chair, doing homework and occasionally, when no one was looking, practicing her tree lines for an audience of stuffed animals. And Alistair stayed away. He'd promised he wouldn't push, and he kept that promise. But he didn't disappear entirely. Books arrived at the shop, rare editions, customer requests, titles Alara had mentioned in passing months ago. They came with no note, no return address, just a simple invoice marked "Paid in Full." Donations to the shop's children's reading program appeared from anonymous sources. A grant for a new Storytime rug materialized from a foundation no one had heard of. Alara knew it was him. Everyone knew. But she didn't acknowledge it, didn't thank him, didn't reach out. The silence between them stretched on, filled with everything unsaid, until the night she found him in the shop at midnight. She'd forgotten her keys, had to come back for them. And there he was sitting in the magic chair, a book open in his lap, looking for all the world like he belonged there. He stood when she entered, startled, apologetic. "I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't be here. This is where I feel close to you. The only place I can be near you without hurting you." She should have been angry. She should have demanded he leave. Instead, she sat in the chair across from him and said, "Read to me." He blinked. "What? Read to me? From whatever book that is. I want to hear your voice. The real one. Not Alfie's, not the billionaire's. Yours." He looked at her for a long moment, then opened the book and began to read. It was a children's story, something Lily would love, about a girl who built a library in a treehouse. His voice was low and steady, and as he read, Alara closed her eyes and let herself pretend, just for a moment, that they were somewhere else. Someone else. Just two people sharing a story in the dark. When he finished, the silence returned, softer now. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "Why haven't you given up?" "Because I made you a promise." He set the book aside. "I told you I'd stay as long as it takes." "I meant it. And if it takes forever?" "Then forever it is." She studied him in the dim light, the tired eyes, the genuine sorrow, the patience that seemed bottomless. This wasn't a man playing a part. This wasn't a billionaire slumming for entertainment. This was someone who'd made terrible mistakes and was willing to pay for them indefinitely. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said quietly. "I don't know if I can trust you. Every time I look at you, I remember the lies. I remember feeling stupid, feeling used. I know. But I also remember the way you were with Lily, the way you stayed at that hospital, the way you read to me just now like it was the only thing in the world that mattered." She took a breath. "I don't know what I feel, but I know I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of carrying this alone." He waited, not speaking, not pushing. "Come to the shop tomorrow," she said. "Lily wants to thank you for the books. And I want to try. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but something. A start." The smile that crossed his face was unlike any she'd seen, not triumphant, not relieved, just quietly, deeply grateful. "I'll be there," he said. The bookshop opened at 8 every morning, but Elara arrived by 6:30. She loved these quiet hours, the way the light crept through the windows and illuminated the dust motes dancing among the shelves, the smell of old paper and the faint vanilla of Mr. Henderson's favorite candles. This was her time, her space, her dream made tangible. On the first Thursday of spring, she unlocked the door at 6:45 and found Alistair already there, sitting on the steps with a paper cup of coffee in each hand. "You know, we're not open yet," she said, but there was no edge to it. "Not anymore, I know." He stood, offered her a cup. "But I was in the neighborhood, and I thought you might want company. Lily mentioned you've been stressed about the summer reading program." Lily, of course. Her daughter had become the unlikely bridge between them, the neutral ground where trust could slowly, carefully be rebuilt. Alistair came to the shop 3 afternoons a week now, ostensibly to help, actually to sit with Lily in the magic chair and read to her for hours. He'd become a fixture, as natural as the shells themselves. "You don't have to keep bringing me coffee," Elara said, taking the cup. "I have a machine inside. Your machine makes terrible coffee. My machine makes free coffee." He smiled, that quiet smile she'd come to recognize. "Then consider this my contribution to overhead." She let him in, and they worked in companionable silence for the next hour or organizing new arrivals, him repairing a wobbly shelf that had bothered her for weeks. He'd gotten good at that, the practical things. No more YouTube tutorials, no more pretending. Just a man learning to be useful in small, consistent ways. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "I'm observing." She turned back to her books. "There's a difference, is there?" "Yes, staring is personal. Observing is professional. I'm observing whether my volunteer shelving repairman is earning his keep." He laughed, and the sound filled the shop like sunlight. "And? Am I? You haven't broken anything yet." High praise. The summer reading program launched in June, and Elara discovered that Alistair Finch, former billionaire, had a hidden talent. He was extraordinary with children. He didn't talk down to them or condescend. He sat on the floor and listened to their stories about dinosaurs and princesses and the boy next door who was mean for no reason. He recommended books with genuine enthusiasm, not the polished performance of someone selling something, but the genuine excitement of someone who'd learned to love reading late in life and wanted everyone else to discover it too. "You're good at this," she said one afternoon, watching him mediate a fierce debate between two 7-year-olds about whether dragons could be friends with knights. "They're easy to talk to," he said, extricating himself gently from the argument. "They don't want anything from me except my attention. It's refreshing." She thought about that later, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about all the people who wanted things from Alistair Finch investors, employees, journalists, hangers-on. She thought about how lonely that must be, to have everyone want something and no one want you. And she thought about Alfie, the maintenance man who'd wanted nothing except to be near her. Maybe that was the most real thing about him. After all, the conversation happened on a Sunday, when the shop was closed and Lily was at a friend's house. Elara had asked Alistair to help her rearrange the children's section, a project she'd been avoiding for months. They worked for hours, moving shelves, sorting books, arguing good-naturedly about the optimal height for picture book displays. When they finished, they sat on the floor among the chaos, sharing a pizza she'd ordered from the place down the street. "Can I ask you something?" She picked at a slice, not looking at him. "Anything." "Why did you do it, really? Not the bookshop, not the hospital, not any of the things you've done since. Why did you become Alfie in the first place?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I was lonely." "I know that. You've said that. But there are a million ways to deal with loneliness." "Why that way? Why me?" He set down his pizza, giving her his full attention. "Do you remember our first meeting? The real one, when you came to assess the apartment?" "Of course. I watched you that day. Not in a creepy way," he added quickly. I watched you move through my space like it was any other space. You didn't treat me differently because of who I was. You didn't perform or pander or try to impress me. You were just yourself. And I realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had been just themselves around me." Elara said nothing, but something shifted in her chest. "When I pretended to be Alfie, it wasn't about tricking you. It was about giving myself permission to be just myself too. No billion-dollar company. No expectations. No one wanting anything except—" He trailed off. "Except what?" "Except me. Just me. For no reason other than existing." The words hung between them, naked and vulnerable. Elara thought about all the time she'd felt invisible, felt like just a cleaner, just a single mom, just someone the world overlooked. She'd never considered that invisibility might feel like freedom to someone else. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" "For making you feel like you had to hide. For not seeing you sooner." He shook his head. "You have nothing to apologize for. I'm the one who lied. I know. And I'm still working on forgiving that. But I'm also starting to understand why. And that matters too." They sat in silence for a while, the afternoon light fading around them. Then Elara stood, extended her hand. "Come on. There's something I want to show you." She led him to the back of the shop, to a door he'd never noticed before. Behind it was a small room, dusty and cluttered, filled with old furniture and boxes of unsold inventory. "This used to be Mr. Henderson's office," she said. "But he doesn't need it anymore. He mostly stays home now, lets me run things. And I've been thinking—" She pushed open the door, revealing the space in full. It was small but cozy, with a window overlooking the tiny garden behind the shop. Morning glories climbed the frame, and the setting sun cast everything in gold. "I want to turn it into a reading room," she said. "Just for kids. A place where they can come and feel safe and read whatever they want. No rules, no expectations. Just books and comfort and somewhere to belong." Alistair looked at the space, then at her. "It's perfect. I know. But I can't do it alone. I need help with the renovation, with the funding, with... She took a breath. I need you. Not your money. Not your connections. You, your hands, your time, your presence. I need to know if you're still willing to give that. He turned to face her fully, and she saw everything in his eyes, the hope, the fear, the love he'd been carrying for what felt like forever. Elara, I would give you anything, everything, but what you're asking for, my time, my presence, that's not a sacrifice. That's a gift. That's all I've ever wanted. Then stay. She reached for his hand, and when their fingers intertwined, it felt like coming home. Not as Alfie, not as the billionaire, just as you. Stay with me? He pulled her close, and when they kissed, it wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was quiet and real, and filled with the weight of everything they'd survived to reach this moment. I love you, he whispered against her hair. I have from the beginning. I'll love you until the end. I know, she said. I'm getting there too. A year later, the children's reading room had become the heart of the spined leaf. Kids came after school, on weekends, whenever they needed somewhere to belong. Lily held court in the magic chair, reading to younger children with the solemn authority of a 7-year-old who took her responsibilities seriously. And on a warm Thursday morning, with the shop filled with sunlight and laughter, Alastair Finch stood behind the counter beside Elara Jones and marveled at the life he'd found. He'd sold the last of his company shares months ago, invested in a modest portfolio that would support them comfortably without the weight of billions. He volunteered at the shop, fixed things that broke, read to children, and went home every night to a woman who loved him not despite who he was, but because of it. Penny for your thoughts, Elara said, slipping her hand into his. I was just thinking, he said, that I used to own half the city, and I've never been richer than I am right now. She smiled, that warm smile that had started everything. Corny, true, also corny. But she squeezed his hand, and he knew she understood. The door chimed, and Lily burst in, fresh from school, already heading for the reading room. Alastair, come read with me. We're on chapter 12, and the dragon is about to wake up. He looked at Elara, who nodded, laughing. Go, your adoring public awaits. He went, following Lily into the little room with the morning glory window. And as he settled into a chair, surrounded by children waiting for a story, Alastair Finch, formerly a billionaire, currently a bookshop owner, permanently and completely loved, opened the book and began to read.